Maestre from Indiana University. I'll be talking about a paper titled Not Another Medication Adherence App, Critical Reflections on Addressing Public HIV-Related Stigma Through Design. In the US, 8 out of 10 HIV patients report feeling HIV-related stigma. Public HIV-related stigma is often enacted in the forms of discrimination, social rejection, and physical violence. These enactments can have detrimental effects on physical and psychological health. People who are the target of this type of stigma often experience depression and anxiety. Moreover, public HIV-related stigma can negatively affect access to proper treatment and support, as individuals living with HIV may want to avoid disclosure of HIV status for fear of social rejection. We address the following research questions. How do people living with HIV currently cope with public HIV-related stigma? And how do they currently use technology to help them cope with public HIV-related stigma in their daily lives? We completed semi-structured interviews with 8 social workers and 9 people living with HIV from an HIV support center. We also collected data via 2-arc studies with 27 people living with HIV. The data was analyzed by a thematic analysis with an inductive and theoretical approach. I met with co-authors several times to identify, revise, and group the codes into emerging categories, as well as to triangulate the data and further verify and refine salient themes. We found that the most common coping strategies used against public HIV-related stigma were disclosing or not disclosing about their HIV status or HIV-related experiences. On the one hand, participants indicated that disclosure of HIV status allowed them to access social support. On the other hand, non-disclosure of HIV status allowed them to hide or conceal that they were living with HIV, and thus avoid plausible enactments of public HIV-related stigma, like social rejection or violence. The participants reported employing social media platforms to adapt and use these coping strategies. However, we found that there were tensions experienced at the moment of using these coping strategies. While disclosure can facilitate the seeking and provision of social support, allow the normalization of HIV, and promote the advocacy against HIV-related stigma by making people living with HIV more visible, there's also a lack of control of how the contents of their disclosures may propagate or disseminate in social media platforms. For instance, participants worried that they didn't know who was reading their posts and whether their disclosures could be copied and shared elsewhere without their consent. Participants also reported using social media for dating purposes. HIV status disclosure fields in such platforms were employed as a way to advocate against public HIV-related stigma, as well as to filter users who may possibly enact public HIV-related stigma in the forms of verbal violence or rejection. However, disclosing that they were living with HIV via HIV status fields did not allow them to control the timing of such a disclosure. In fact, HIV status disclosure fields may constitute a missed advocacy opportunity to decrease the negative perceptions about HIV. For instance, a few participants argued that they wished that they could prepare the recipients of their disclosures with appropriate educational material regarding HIV. Finally, there were also tensions around the exchange of social support in online platforms. Participants mentioned that they often can't bond with others living with HIV. Thus, they asked for systems that would allow them to be matched with mentors based not only on similar lived experiences, but also on other personal traits such as age, gender, and sexual orientation. Based on our findings, we will now discuss a few design implications. In order to promote safe disclosures, we argue that we could explore enhancing disclosure on social media by providing mechanisms that would allow people living with HIV identify users who may hold negative views or positions on HIV. Additionally, these mechanisms could provide information on how to disclose HIV-related experiences. Finally, customized platforms could be designed so that they implement what Anne Light refers to forgetting or obscuring, so that the disclosure information is not permanent and can disappear after a predetermined amount of time. To promote better experiences with intimacy, online platforms could be designed so that they make sure that users have been presented to educational material about HIV prior to HIV-related disclosures. Also, we exhort for stronger policies that would monitor enactments of public HIV-related stigma on these platforms, like the use of offensive and stigmatizing language. To promote better experiences with bonding, we suggest the creation of customized technology that will allow people living with HIV to be matched with others who have lived similar HIV-related experiences and who could act as mentors to those who are beginning their HIV journey. This matching could be based on similar lived experiences as well as personal traits. Additionally, mentors could be provided with stigma toolkits that have been found to be effective in face-to-face settings at the time of helping people cope with public HIV-related stigma. To conclude, we would like to advocate for the exploration of technology for HIV that moves beyond medication adherence and focuses more on how to aid people cope with public HIV-related stigma at the individual level. Thank you.